Hi there, it's Tim here from Digital Signage Explored. We have Lauren, Retail Account Manager from Pioneer Group with us today. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
We're over at the Retail Technology Show, and actually we wanted to talk a little bit about QSR, right? Because you have quite a few QSR customers today.
Yeah, we do.
We've got a couple we can use names, right? There's a couple of names that you can put out there because we've done case studies.
Yeah,
Who are
absolutely.
those? Name those names.
So Wasabi, we've been with for over 5 years now. Signage Live being our partner. And it's been, a really successful partnership, I think, for the last few years and expanding.
And I think that's what we wanted the subject to be around is longevity. Because it's not that often, because Wasabi, I think, have been with you for 7 years, or is it longer than that?
Yeah, about 7 years.
Yeah. So one of the questions that comes up when going through that process is what happens when I reach the end of my life cycle on hardware or whatever? And 7 years is long enough. So you've experienced that with them, right? You've experienced change?
Yeah, absolutely. When we first started, they were using obviously older model screens, ones that weren't using system on chip. So we had to use a media player with them. And then obviously as years go by, they want to upgrade that. And then we've naturally upgraded the screens and upgraded to system on chip, which has just made it a lot obviously easier for us as installers, but also cheaper for them for not having that extra piece of equipment.
So what was their what was the point when they had to make that decision? Did they come to you and say, look, we're struggling with X, Y, and Z, or we need to consider this is our future proofing? How did that conversation go?
Yeah, it was kind of a natural conversation, really. We had a lot of service call outs for screens that were faulty, there was lines across them. So, we were noticing more and more call outs, and we thought, this is the time. You do need to kind of upgrade because it's costing you more for us to go out and fix them. Then that's when the upgrades kind of happened.
So was that like I guess, as you say, like the tickets start creeping up slowly, you start to see a little bit more issues come through, and that's expected. Is there a typical expected lifespan of the hardware used for digital signage?
I think it's quite good. We can expect like 5 years.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, 5 years.
That's really good, especially if you're like new doing the research. 5 years is, because when you're measuring ROI, that's one of the big things to take into consideration.
Absolutely.
It's not just purchasing the hardware, it's, well, we are going to need to repurchase that. So actually what's like a 10-year tail of everything that we invest in.
Absolutely.
So is there any advice that you would kind of suggest when looking at, I guess we'll start from the beginning, looking at hardware and installation first time round when thinking about longevity and how can we kind of pre-plan for that?
Yeah, I think future-proofing is always great. Spend a little bit more at the start because that will really help you in the future. So although it may look like a big up cost those years down the line, I think it will benefit from you.
So you spread that over the period of time and you know that you're going to get that return on investment.
Yes.
For the better hardware that you're investing.
Exactly, yeah.
Is there anything that needs to be taken into consideration when we're talking about content and that kind of planning? Obviously, future-proofing isn't really the right word for that, but it's more kind of like just prepping for changes in requirements for the future.
Yeah, I mean, with Wasabi, we've expanded their estate a lot. So having a content management system like yours that their marketing team can use centrally and they can give access to, but we also have access to. It really helps them. Having the system, which you can have a centralized system, you can choose the admin rights, you can choose who has access to what, so you can have super admin, or you can have other people in your marketing team, for instance, that just need to schedule the content, but don't need to adjust the content.
Yeah.
You don't have any risk of things going wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that's really beneficial for the client.
I definitely agree. I think from what I've experienced when it comes to scale is you don't want to shoehorn yourself into a CMS or any kind of platform really that is only built for one.
Yes.
Because as you grow, and the first intention is for it to be successful, right? So you have to plan for that success. So if you go, well, we're going to invest in a software that does X, Y, and Z, we might roll it out to 3 screens or 4 locations, or whatever it is today. But if the potential is for that to expand to 20 or 40, you have to consider the pieces that need to be built into that software day one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've even got talks about clients wanting to have the same system in America, for example, for stores opening worldwide. So to have that one system, it just really streamlines the process.
Yeah. And with Wasabi, obviously, at the beginning, do you have an idea of how many stores were originally on the installation?
I think initially it was around 20 stores.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it wasn't a small
No.
beginning footprint to start with.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't small, but it has really expanded since then. I think we have over 100 on the system
and that's
now.
a very different beast to manage when you talk about that, because then you've got content variations. Like, is there stock available somewhere? I don't know. Is it franchised or is that a wholly owned?
It's wholly owned.
Okay, so then you're probably going to have like one central management for all of that content.
Absolutely.
Do they have a team that's dedicated to doing that?
Yeah, well, they have a marketing team, and they are solely responsible for that content. But also, obviously, you've got to factor in the IT team, and that makes sure that there's power and data available on site and things like that. So, you've got to collaborate with all the teams in Wasabi to make sure everything's up and running.
100%.
And then we've got our signage team that help with kind of making sure everything's up and running. If there's anything offline, we'll flag it to them. And like renewals, we can make sure that it's renewed in time. There's no downtime.
That's something that comes up a lot as well, depending on how you purchase, is making sure that you've got a way to consolidate all of those costs, rather than if you end up dealing with 100 licenses over a 12-month period, you can end up cutting a lot of checks, which just takes a lot of time. So being able to consolidate that and make that as easy as possible.
Yeah, I think one of the big things is co-terming. Co-terming makes everyone's life easier. So it's just
everybody's from all sides.
Exactly. So being able to do that just helps everyone.
Yeah, 100%. And the final piece I wanted to ask you around, because longevity, I think, is something that it's not rare, but digital signage is not 200 years old, so we haven't managed to get someone who's been using it for 50, 60 years and are very fluent with it. So we're only really seeing people going through their second, maybe third iteration of that hardware from it becoming more mainstream.
Yeah.
What would you kind of recommend people to first consider when they're day one, they're looking at digital signage for the first time? 3 things that they should consider when they start looking at the future of that digital signage experience.
3 things that I would say are most important are: make sure you are looking at the future and the scalability of this project. Then the hardware, make sure that the lifespan is going to be, you're going to have longevity with it. And then finally, I think service, make sure you've got a CMS partner that are going to support you. There's going to be when there's software updates and upgrades, that's going to happen on time and promptly. I think that's really important.
100%. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming, us meeting here and having this show. It's nice to do it in person every now and then.
Absolutely.
But thank you very much again for coming on.
Thanks, Tim.
Cheers.